Um, Hello, everyone, and welcome to OTT Question Time. My name's Koza Kanji, and I run for Professional. This week, we are talking about addressable advertising, and joining our panel today, in the order that I can see them, are, if we can start with you, Rhys, please.
Rhys McLachlan, Director of Advanced Advertising at ITV.
And what do you do?
Director of Advanced Advertising at ITV.
Yeah.
With responsibility for, currently primary responsibility for the rollout of Planet V.
Great, thank you very much. John.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I'm John Tigg. I am the Managing Director and VP of Sales of Cadent in the European region. So I run all of our technology sales to operators and broadcasters around Europe. Thanks,
John. And Leon.
Hi, Leon Siotis, President for EMEA for SpotX. SpotX is a video advertising platform working with broadcasters, media owners to help monetize their video assets, and we're a subsidiary of RTL Group.
Thanks, Leon. Right, so addressable advertising is a coat of many colors. So in the first instance, actually, John, if I could ask you to tell us about addressable advertising, what are the different flavors of it?
Yeah, very happily. Look, I think in our industry, people love to get tangled up in different terms. And there is often a lot of confusion created by that because, you know, what is the difference between addressable TV and connected TV? Are they part of the same thing? What is advanced TV? But look, I think when we're talking about addressable TV, we can keep it really simple. There's really only two types. There's household-based addressable TV, where you're targeting the characteristics of a household. And there's one-to-one addressable TV where you're targeting the characteristics of an individual. And really kind of, you know, the secret is in addressable, right? So by definition, we're talking about bringing data to the execution of advertising at the moment at which it goes out. And so when I think about addressable, I think about it in terms of really those two buckets.
And is there a difference, John, between addressable for TV versus addressable for non-TV? In other words, for web browsing, for music, for entertainment?
I think within the confines of what we're talking about, you know, watching television, whether that happens, you know, whether it's someone watching TV on their laptop, whether they're watching it on their mobile phone, you know, as a person, if I was to ask my brother, he would just say he's watching TV. He doesn't make that distinction. And I think, you know, as an industry, you know, we need to more and more think of it that way as well. You know, it's certainly, you know, TV is not simply, you know, broadcasting that happens on the big screen in your living room. It's every screen on which you're watching TV. And so, you know, I certainly don't differentiate when I'm thinking about it within the confines of what is addressable TV.
This goes back to our old industry philosophical chestnut, about is TV still TV if it's not on a TV?
I mean, from my point of view, it's driven by the content, rather than kind of the means by which or the screen through which someone is viewing it. And so I think it's helpful in that sense of keeping it simple.
Thanks, John. Your cat has just joined us as well.
Yeah, he might have something interesting to say.
Leon, can you tell us about the addressable TV market? What's the story right now? What was it actually at the beginning of this year versus what is it right now? And how has it developed over the last few years?
Definitely. So I think, you know, I'll focus on, you know, I'd say kind of a rising part of the addressable market being the kind of streaming side of things. So as John said, there's multiple flavors. As a consumer, it really doesn't matter. It's all TV. However, there is a difference in the, you know, I'd say kind of your back end and your delivery system. And kind of streaming has been a big focus for the industry as of the beginning of this year. But I mean, this has been an ongoing path for the past couple of years. I would say from a consumption perspective, you know, COVID has definitely been an enabler. It definitely accelerated, you know, users' consumption of all flavors of TV, and then especially, of course, you know, new flavors being the ability to kind of stream this into your living room. And it's funny when you mention, you know, is TV still TV depending on the device? I mean, I'm in agreement with John. However, what I would say as well is that actually a huge amount of your TV being watched continues to be on that big screen. So regardless of the delivery, regardless of the kind of delivery mechanism, people are kind of sitting in their living room and watching that content. Because I know historically there was a lot of focus on mobile and tablet, which of course is still, it's still a growing segment. It gives people the flexibility to watch this content wherever they are. But I think maybe to some people's surprise, right, the last couple of years, we've actually seen a lot of growth on that, on that TV device itself.
That's actually interesting, isn't it? Because let's say when BBC iPlayer first came out, laptops were the predominant device, and then it started moving towards mobile and tablet, and TVs, as in home TVs, big set TVs, were sort of on the downward trajectory, but now they've gone right back up again, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I'm sure, Rhys can give you specific data that they've seen from an ITV perspective. But, I would have said if you had asked the industry a couple of years ago, they may have not necessarily thought that would be the trend that we would be seeing. But, it's a really powerful device, that big screen in your living room.
Yeah. Rhys, can you talk to that first of all about devices, addressable devices?
Yeah, Leon's absolutely correct that the preferred device of choice for viewing is the television. It's testament to, I think, the developments which have been undertaken at both an OEM level and by businesses like Sky to provide much greater optionality in what you can view via that screen now. And I think it will continue to be the preeminent device for viewing moving forward. But it does form one part of a much richer and more broader tapestry of viewing that we have to account for across a multitude of screens and a multitude of environments. That nothing rings the bells quite like television, and that's set on a Saturday night.
Right. Okay. Can you tell us first of all about Planet? Can you tell us then about Planet V? If you can give us a sort of broad synopsis of it first, and then I'll ask you a couple of specific questions on it.
Yeah, so look, and I'm sure many folk attending this call will be familiar with the sales pitch and the collateral that we've put in market around Planet V, but the very short elevator pitch for it is we have worked with Amovi to develop an end-to-end programmatic ecosystem for the management, allocation, buying and planning of programmatic video, powered in the first instance by ITV Hub viewing and ITV Hub registered viewer data. Although over the course of time, we will be welcoming other participants onto the platform so as that we can establish a common technology standard for the broadcaster ecosystem. We were able to ally ourselves around standards on technology, on delivery, on data, on activation and measurement.
Okay, and how long, by the way, was it in development before it went live? So
ITV concluded the licensing arrangement with Amobi at the end of March 2019. Since that time, we've invested 50,000 hours of development work to deconstruct the assets, which are the core components of it, and reassemble them in a way that ensures that what has been brought to market is the most progressive and dynamic solution for broadcasters specifically. I think one of the things that I'm really minded to repeat myself on when I get the opportunity to speak to Planet V is, if I may paraphrase Henry Ford, as we didn't set out to build a faster horse here. Our aspirations as ITV wasn't to get into the game of trying to improve on a DSP or improve on an SSP or improve on an ad server. We took a more holistic view of the ecosystem and what was required for the entirety of the ecosystem. So trying to get our arms holistically around all the moving pieces that are required to develop programmatic solutions for broadcasters, and put that into a single assembly where you've got high fidelity functioning components between each part of the system, but it is all contained within a singular proposition. So it's not a better DSP, it's not a better SSP, it's not an ad server. It's a combination of a lot of those features, but the configuration is uniquely positioned to fulfill all the requirements that a premium broadcaster it needs to bring a proposition to market.
And actually, that was going to be my next question, Rhys, which is what are those benefits? What is the proposition that a broadcaster needs? Because the ultimate question is, what problems or what challenges were you trying to address with Planet V?
There are two, I think, two key ones. The first of which is, look, that stable door is open and that horse has gone as regards to the inevitability of television going programmatic, right? So it's incumbent upon businesses like us to lean into that opportunity and find ways that we are able to, assert our influence and authority over that journey in a way that ensures that we are maintaining maintaining our voice. If we do not, then we will be passengers on that bus rather than at the driver's seat. And I think that's incredibly important for the UK media ecosystem as a whole, because over the course of the last 10 to 15 years, the marketing narrative has largely been written and presented to market by US West Coast technology businesses that don't necessarily have our economic value, the beating heart of their businesses, and are largely looking to disintermediate. So one, right, it's about ensuring that we were able to respond to our clients' needs for the need in terms of providing programmatic access to our inventory. And secondly, and critically, it's about ensuring we're able to maintain sovereignty over that process and sovereignty over the entirety of the value chain. And I think a really great way of demonstrating why that's so important to ITV was the ISPA PwC report from earlier this summer that clearly demonstrated that in their terms, in a premium video ecosystem, programmatic ecosystem, 49 cents in the dollar of value is extracted between the point at which the advertiser pays for their campaign and revenue that is received by the publisher. 49 cents in the dollar, right? And I use the American currency term deliberately because more often than not, they are US technology businesses which are extracting value through that chain. And for a business like ITV that invests in content, that commissions and producers and is the financier for that content, that is not a model that engenders sustainability. So on one hand, we want to be programmatic, we want to be more progressive, we want to respond to market needs for more automation, the layering of data and all those wonderful attributes which have worked very well in digital. We want to do it in a way that ensures that we maintained the value retention as much as we possibly could. And that is the genesis for Planet V.
Well, right, Rhys, and sort of I would add to that, to go even a little bit further, the programmatic ecosystem that we see today was built to support, the monetization of remnant inventory. Not something which has ever existed in television, frankly, and to do that on the basis of a kind of a second and then first party auction. Now, the television economy is based on the idea that you are going to get upfront commitments from advertisers or at least ahead of time so that you can commission great content, so that you can make great content. And so that side of it hasn't gone away. And so it's incredibly important that anything that the television industry tries to do as a whole to enable programmatic, which it must, needs to support that economy. And without that, it just won't move anywhere. And so, that's kind of, I think that plays quite an important role.
John, let's get into that a bit more, which is to say, right, look, you defined very kindly addressable for us at the beginning of the session. How has TV traditionally been sold, advertising on TV, that is, yeah? And then we can also just talk about, quickly define programmatic, in case there are any people watching that sort of just need an update on this.
Where shall I start?
So how TV was sold, linear TV we're talking about.
Yeah. So, I mean, linear TV has kind of traditionally been sold based on, gross rating points. So ratings, which are obviously only measured after the fact, but sold on cost per thousands, long before the programming goes out. So, certainly done, I guess it's not software enabled. So kind of to the second part of the question, what is programmatic? Software enabled trading of advertising inventory.
Yeah.
And of course, the kind of the advent of IP enabled channels has meant that television can be traded in that manner, or at least some of television can be traded in that manner. But of course, there's still a very large part of it, traditional linear viewing, which cannot be traded in that manner. And a lot of that comes down to measurement. but it also comes down to kind of the way that content is broadcast. So yeah, those are the two kind of things that define it.
And Leon, programmatic, I mean, you guys at SpotX, you have multiple clients all over Europe. Yeah, I mean, what are the attitudes of broadcasters to programmatic? Do broadcasters like it? Yeah, do they prefer the old way of selling and or addressable too?
I mean, I would say, I think, no one likes change. So, if you had to ask somebody, could they live in the glory days of 15 years ago, the answer would probably be yes. However, I think that, what we're calling programmatic, being the kind of underpinning technology to automate the buying and selling of ad space is, an inevitability, right? And I think that, people are embracing it at different speeds, right? I mean, I think some broadcasters were very quick to experiment and try new ways of selling to offer, buyers priority access to certain pods of inventory via the kind of via programmatic trading. While others may have taken a much more conservative approach and not wanted to kind of execute any of their deals using the software. So I think that when people say like programmatic was built to enable the sale of remnant inventory, I mean, I don't think that's necessarily true. I think programmatic is you just have essentially it's a code base that people are using. It happens that perhaps the first people that adopted it were at the lower end of that, but then of course that slowly moves its way up the value chain. And I think all the tools are there today to be able to make it work for whatever type of business you have. It's just about kind of setting it up in a way that works for you, right? And setting up for a way that works for a broadcaster. So I wouldn't necessarily tarnish programmatic with the brush that it's kind of low value.
Yeah. Well, the difference, however, Rhys, isn't it? Is it true to say that with programmatic for TV specifically, there's not a level playing field between online and TV, in as much as TV ads are much more heavily regulated, right? So they can't go through a sort of very clean programmatic route. They still have to be regulated at some point because you need to know what ads are being shown on your channel.
Yeah, that's correct. But we, as ITV, as a PSB, we operate to the highest common standard. So we are Clearcast approved across the entirety of our estate. Clearly, that's not true of other video services that aren't obligated to adhere to those same set of standards. So, all the broadcasters in the UK for their video on demand programmatic solutions are operating to that Clearcast requirement.
Yeah. Good. And John, about the old way versus the new way, is it true also to say that linear TV was sold on the idea of scale? Yeah, which exactly as you said, is based on rating points and overnights, but ultimately it's based on a sample, right? A sample of viewers, whereas programmatic and addressable is sold on actual numbers rather than an extrapolation. Yeah,
I mean that's certainly the aim, well. Let's not sort of confuse programmatic with addressable, because obviously programmatic just describes the software itself. But if we're talking about addressability, yes, we're talking about data-enabled advertising execution in a sort of in a just-in-time or real-time fashion.
Yeah.
So that's kind of that's the difference.
Which one do broadcasters prefer?
Rhys?
Increasingly, we're moving to a real-time dynamic. Right? There is a much greater degree of flex for us to be able to both satisfy our customer objectives and our campaign KPIs, as well as increase the efficacy of our inventory allocation if we're reading and responding to real-time signals at a device level. And at the heart of the developments that we are making as an industry, as a broadcast industry, is how we are able to gather and activate in a compliant way those signals that cover both identity as well as device as well as metadata around content, and you apply those in real time decision making for advertising placements. There is significant steps forward, being undertaken in the development of those solutions that will, be the rising tide that floats all boats in the broadcaster ecosystem. Provides us with, a value proposition which is as compelling, if not more compelling, than some of those solutions that have been offered up by those West Coast big tech businesses. And why I think they're more compelling is because we're using these data signals and applying them to high caliber content. Right, so this is big screen, in the house big screen, high production value entertainment. It's video, it's high quality, and it is produced, for those screens by professionals. And we're layering that with data and making decisions in real time. That is nirvana for an advertiser.
Well, and to your point, Rhys, that you made a little bit earlier, in reference to the PwC ISBA study. Not only is it kind of television content, it's in a fraud-free managed environment, and it's verified first-party data. And this whole identity piece is a really important thing, because not all data is equal. And I guess what we've seen over the last decade is a period in which largely, certainly programmatic advertising has been driven by third-party data. And I think what we're seeing over the last couple of years, this is not just specific to television, but it's certainly specific to addressable television, is broadcasters, building, large amounts of data on their own viewers and using them for targeting, and indeed working with platform operators like Virgin Media, like Sky, and like others around Europe and the US, to enable subscriber data from television platform operators, which is within managed environments, which is verified, which is first party, and which provides you all of those controls that Rhys was just describing. So it is unique. It certainly brings something very new and different to TV, and it's subsequently attracting new and different advertisers to TV that it wasn't doing, prior to that.
Yeah, the veracity of our data pool is one of our key objectives working through 21. We want to have highly accurate first-party data. We want to ensure we have in place the right consent mechanisms so that we can activate, for both targeting and analytics, those data signals. So there's, when we talk about programmatic, we frequently talk about the pipes or the mechanisms that enable programmatic. We have to be mindful that there are several other constituents in that market. And one is the content, the color of the content, and the other is the scale, the depth, the breadth, and the veracity of the data that sits around that. And it's the application of that combination that will drive our market forward.
I would kind of just jumping in, the ISBA report seems to be thrown out a lot at the moment. What I would say, right, is that the stats that are being used are, usually in relation to an advertiser buying things in an open market and overlaying a number of different, technologies and, whether it's data providers in order to enhance the value of that inventory. So I don't necessarily think it's a fair comparison to a broadcaster or somebody choosing to use their chosen technology in order to execute a campaign, with a buyer in a upfront manner, right, in some form of guaranteed manner. I think those are very kind of different situations. So it's not, yes, there was the ISBA report, but even when they were discussing where money was potentially, or they couldn't identify it, they're talking about buying things in the open market on display. So I think it probably gets thrown out a lot as the downfalls of technology, but ultimately, I think technology probably adds a lot to the ecosystem as well.
I quite agree, Leon. I think that programmatic has a huge role to play. Absolutely. But I guess the point that at least I was trying to make there was that, at least when we think about addressable TV and whether that is traded programmatically or not, it brings something unique in the sense of the content, the environment, and the type of data. And absolutely those things are and will be traded programmatically. and more. And so, you know, really important that we get that right.
I mean, ultimately, the efficacy of any addressable system is about the user profiling, right? And about the layers of data that you collect and retain about that user. So Rhys at ITV, your starting point would be exactly as you say, your consent mechanism from users. In other words, what they fill in on their registration form, their initial registration form to use ITV Hub.
Yeah, but we should be mindful also that it's not, this isn't some sort of zero-sum game. There are a lot of other data signals that are available that deliver, you know, incremental value, both a viewer, consumer, and an advertiser, as well as a broadcaster. And I'm, you know, really fond of, you know, trotting out the phrase that, you know, in a programmatic market, we mustn't lose sight of provenance. You know, and I once again repeat myself. You know, the quality of the environment is a critical function in the delivery of advertising outcomes. You know, congruency is critical. So provenance is incredibly important. And just because we might not have, you know, detailed signals around identity and device and location, doesn't mean that we can't think about programmatic execution using other signals which are readily available to us.
Mm. How many attributes, by the way, does Planet V use? Are you able to say?
Yeah, we have 36 standard attributes which are gathered at the point of sign-in consent. But then I think my folk on this session will also know that we've recently entered into a partnership with InfoSum, which will enable us to significantly augment that with through a mechanism that will enable us to match our identities to the identities that are gathered using the consent mechanisms from our advertising customers as well. And so when we get to fuse those two identities together, then we are developing some really sophisticated segmentation and audience targeting options for the platform. It's a really exciting space for us. And
you use, I imagine, something like Experian Mosaic, or indeed Experian Mosaic, as another third-party input.
So there's some partners. I can't recall whether I'm able to name them, but you know, for example, there may be businesses like Experian which help us, which help to complement the data sets that are native to the platform.
Yeah.
But we also need to be mindful that at a rate of knots, this ecosystem is moving to a cookieless world. Many of those third-party data providers have not necessarily moved at the appropriate speed that provides us with the comfort that they operate, that they will be sufficiently enabled to operate at the levels of complexity and accuracy and within the right consent requirements, you know, in the future state.
Yeah. I can hear my phone pinging away over here on the side. People are evidently sending me questions directly to me. Please do feel free to add them in the Q&A section or in the chat section at the bottom there. I'm conscious that, Christ, we've already gone to 4:30, and we've hardly talked about anything yet. So we will get to the questions shortly. Leon, I'm going to come to you with a slightly tricky one, I guess, which is about yield. So you can work out the mathematics for linear advertising, and you can do a CPM, on it, for audience. You can do, obviously, CPMs for addressable. Can you talk us through the mechanism of that and which one ultimately is, first of all, more expensive? I know the answer to this, but I'm going to ask you anyway. And secondly, can we sort of compare the two? So if we can go to for addressable, how do you work out the sort of CPM for that?
I mean, it's traded on a CPM, right? So cost per 1,000 impressions, and you're buying, an audience, or I guess as a buyer, you have the option of buying a number of different things, but ultimately you're paying for something on a CPM value. And I mean, I think yields, how they were originally set, each individual provider and media owner is going to set their own yield, their own kind of CPM price that they need to receive in order to make it worth their time, right, to invest in the content, to be able to run their service. And I think that we've seen over the past 6-9 months, yields have remained relatively stable. I know that with the we did have as viewership kind of rose, there wasn't any degradation. We didn't see a reduction in CPMs. across any of our kind of streaming services this year. So I expect yield to kind of continue to maintain. I mean, I think the demand is definitely there, and as the supply continues to grow, we still haven't hit that inflection point where supply outstrips demand on across any kind of OTT devices.
John, which one's more expensive, linear or OTT advertising?
Well, let's talk quickly about addressability and what that does. So, I mean, this is a tricky one because addressable TV in Europe is not a mature market by any means. So only the UK and actually Belgium have really any maturity in this space at all. So in some respects, well, and I should add, of course, those that are present in the market don't talk too much about their pricing. So we need to look at markets that do have some maturity and where there's some data available. Of course, the US is a very different market, but it's one in which Cadent has a very big presence. And look, over the course of the last 5 years, addressable CPMs have certainly come down, but we're still seeing, something equivalent to 3 to 5 times the equivalent television CPM for an addressable audience. Now, there's kind of a couple of ways you could look at that. You could say, that's incredibly expensive. Why would we pay that? But at the end of the day, the exit CPM to reach your audience is actually lower than the equivalent linear CPM in many cases. And so it sort of justifies itself through the attribution that you can achieve through addressable TV. So do you get a higher yield from addressable? As a broadcaster, absolutely. But that's not going to apply the same. Each and every television impression is not the same. Hence why you don't see many broadcasters selling addressability on prime time. Typically today it's still a young market, and so you're not going to see that on the biggest channels. You're going to see it on kind of the next biggest things. And then, as I kind of said earlier, OTT, whether it's linear, whether it's VOD, I mean, look, typically the CPM is determined by the audience and the content. And it's the market that decides the price. And so does it yield better? I would think probably. But Rhys, you probably you're probably closer to this than I am.
I think what we need to be very cautious about is trying to bundle it all together. In many respects, linear and OTT or addressable TV have different rationales on the media plan. And big linear TV, Saturday night, Friday night, Monday Night Football on Sky, that sort of stuff. That's mass simultaneous reach, the likes of which no other platform has been able to develop or deliver in the market to this point. That is of huge advertising value. That's where brands get built. That's where reputations get made. And what we are developing, what we need to develop as a broadcaster industry is being able to augment that with optionality that works for different parts of the marketing ecosystem. And therefore, I'm really minded to be cautious around just evaluating on a like-for-like, basis a CPM. The different parts of the marketing plan with ideally different KPIs or objectives sent against it. And if I may just pivot to the question which Simon dropped into the chat there, what we should be evaluating, one of the metrics that we should be really focused on is business outcomes. And what we should also be thinking about as an industry is, rather than setting up a set of predefined, metrics that enable us to evaluate true incremental value, we should create models that have huge amounts of agility so that we can develop attribution and effectiveness and assessment of addressable TV based on a client's needs, rather than trying to shoehorn it into a pre-established set of, a pre-configured set of metrics that kind of try and catch it for all.
Let's address Simon's question, actually. So Simon Thomas from Group M has written, Leon and John, this is going to be for you now because Rhys has already addressed this, but what metrics are best to measure the true incremental value of addressable inventory, especially related to Rhys's point about quality content provenance. John?
I mean, look, I think when you think about kind of the use cases for addressable TV, that's probably a good place to start. So, you know, the first few years of addressable have really been dominated by the ability to be able to granularly target very specific geolocations, often on behalf of, you know, advertisers that are not typical to TV. So, you know, they could be local businesses, local banks, you know, local services businesses. And ultimately, those businesses are going to measure the effectiveness of addressable TV by how many people walk through their door, how many people book test drives, how many people buy their products. And I think, you know, Sky have actually done a very good job of capturing how effective addressable TV can be. And you know, they've grown their business massively over the last 5 years on the basis of that. And so to me, if we're talking about a different set of advertisers, you know, we need to be thinking about, you know, what is it that those advertisers are going to want to see ultimately as a return for their addressable TV ad. And you know, those are the things that we're seeing right now.
Leon, different question, which I've had directly, but which I was going to mention anyway, which is that is there a standardized measurement in the system, across the ecosystem, and there isn't? Yeah. Can we look forward to one? Yeah. What's holding that back?
I mean, I think it's a pretty complicated question. And there, I mean, there is, yes, as you said, right, there isn't standardized measurement today, and I think that we'll, you know, probably as an industry be working on that one for a while. You know, you've got to think, if your, you know, linear television has been measured and bought, right, in the same way for decades now, and unwinding that is going to be pretty complicated. And then when you're kind of bringing in, you know, other forms of, you know, kind of digital measurement, you know, into the system, you're not suddenly going to place that on top of, you know, your, you know, your kind of currency that you've been using for a while. And, you know, what I would say is, you know, we work with different partners to do some interesting things, currently working with, you know, audience projects and Tech Edge to help fuse a digital panel alongside the kind of bar panel to try to show incremental reach across, you know, buyers, digital or, you know, kind of OTT campaigns. And I think you'll start to see more and more of, you know, this experimentation with things. But I don't think a lack of standardized measurement should necessarily hold, you know, the industry back. And I don't think, to be fair, I don't think it is. I think that it will definitely help if we can, you know, get there over time, but I don't think it's necessarily a blocker in the near term.
I think the challenge to that, Leon, is and I'm sure both you and John agree, that we need all participants to agree to the same set of standards. So, you know, as ITV, we've been involved in both the early work on Project Origin as well as C-Flight, and we're very much progressing with C-Flight on account of, you know, as a set of broadcasters, we agree that there are values that need to be applied to full screen, sound on, you know. No interrupted, no fast forward, you know, the measurement through that way. Whereas with some of the other measurement initiatives, it's actually been the lowest common denominator. And we need to be mindful, if we want to build out a premium ecosystem, which I think we all want to do here, is that all those participants must sign up to the same set of standards.
I think, so on that, Rhys, though, you know, for instance, I think there's always been this separation, right, where broadcasters have wanted to keep, you know, the measurement unique to broadcasters, while, you know, whether or not digital providers want to keep the measurement, you know, unique to digital providers. But it's like, how do you bring that together, right? How do you find that common ground between the two? Would C-Flight open up to non-broadcasters, kind of thing, would be the question.
Well, as I understand it, you know, Barb were happy to measure YouTube so long as YouTube were prepared to not self-report and operate to the same duration-weighted metrics that all the other broadcasters had agreed to sign up to.
Mm-hmm.
and clearly that was an impasse which they were prepared to move past. What I don't think we want to do as broadcasters is lower our standards. This is a premium advertising channel that we've developed here, and I think we would want to sustain that premium nature of it for as long as we possibly could. And I don't think we should be, dancing to the tune of businesses that will disintermediate and disrupt this ecosystem when there's no burning platform that we need to jump off in order to do that.
And it may be that it doesn't even really matter. I mean, linear television advertising is very, very effective.
Yeah.
And that's why it has endured for so long. And the reality is that viewing is becoming more and more fragmented across more and more screens, all of which can be measured using kind of what we think of as kind of digital advertising metrics. And linear TV can continue to be measured in the, well, I guess DTT broadcast linear TV can be measured in the same way as it always has been. Will it come together? I mean, I just think probably not. It's a very, very difficult problem to solve, like you said, Leon. And I just don't think it necessarily needs to hold us back.
Will it, John, will it change when, how when we all moved from from analog to digital, when was that? 2012, I think, in the UK. Yeah. Is broadcast ever going to be switched off in favor of IP? So, for example, Sky is moving to IP delivery and not having satellite dishes anymore.
Of course it will do. Yeah, inevitably.
Yeah,
so inevitably.
At that point,
absolutely. Yeah.
Will measurement become unified because actually everything's IP delivered?
Probably. I mean, well, it certainly will. But I mean, the question is, when's that going to happen?
Yeah.
And what will linear viewing look like at that point? I mean, traditional linear viewing is declining 5% year over year, and more or less, very broadly. And that viewing is going somewhere, and it's going to typically IP-enabled channels. And so there is going to come a tipping point where you might find that broadcasters might decide that there's another way. So and I guess it remains to be seen when that is. But one thing I've learned is that things always move much slower than you think they're going to.
And then they move very fast. It's actually about the economic model. Like it is currently only currently cheaper to distribute mass linear streams over satellite and cable, but at a certain point, quite literally sending space rockets up to put satellites in space becomes cost prohibitive when you compare it to advances in IP, 5G distribution, compression technology that enables you to deliver Ultra HD over those platforms, and the fact that the government can auction off all that free spectrum to the telcos for 5-6G services. It's purely economics.
Yeah.
The technology is there or thereabouts to enable us to move wholesale to an IP distributed world. But it doesn't currently, it doesn't look good on the balance sheet at this point.
Rhys, almost the last question, because we are coming to the end of the session. This is one for you from an anonymous person, although I know who it is, but they're not anonymous. Is Planet V a revenue play, basically? Yeah, that's what they're asking. Or is it more than that? Is it strategic too?
Well, we're a commercial broadcaster, so it is a strategic commercial play.
Yeah.
It is an effort for us to ensure that we have sovereignty and we're able to preserve our commercial priorities moving forward.
Yeah.
But it is strategic in that it is also an altruistic effort to develop something for the entirety of the ecosystem. We are converting linear dollars to digital dollars. Right, and so we want to ensure that we are monetizing those views and converting that money those advertising revenue streams as efficiently as possible. So it's about revenue preservation and promotion, but it is also a big strategic play to ensure that we are masters of our own destiny as we move into an IP programmatic world at a rate of knots. I
think the gist is ITV preparing for sale.
Yeah, answer that one, Rhys.
Yeah, I don't think Planet V is going to tip the balance sheet in favour of any venture capital fund sniffing around. I don't think that's the make or break of
No. Last word, chaps. John and Leon. What does Addressable look like next year? I mean, has this? You know how we keep hearing that this year has accelerated a lot of trends. Yeah, has Addressable been accelerated by this year, or in a way that it won't go back? Yeah, or is it really going to stabilize again next year? What's your last word on it?
Well, I'd certainly like to think that this year has had a big impact on Addressable and has created habits that won't change, much in the way that we've seen throughout the kind of COVID crisis. I mean, look, one of the kind of aspects of this whole horrendous situation that we found ourselves in is that the economy has kind of opened and closed in different geolocations at different times. In different ways, and of course addressability has the ability to be able to very specifically target areas in very specific ways to help industries, services, retail, etc., that are able to open, to do that in the most effective way possible, and to advertise their services in the most effective way possible. And so I think what we'll see is that there are a number of advertisers that have entered the addressable ecosystem. They found it to be very effective, and they won't turn back on that. At least that's my hope.
Leon?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there will be more content streamed into your living room in 2021 than there was in 2020, and I'm sure that trend will continue. As you said, I think this just definitely accelerates the kind of pre-existing trends before this. As far as the industry goes, I think a lot of the pieces to make the most of it are there already today, and it's not about finding a new shiny toy to talk about next year. I think it's about improving incrementally on the kind of technologies, buying mechanisms, and things that we have in place today. I'm sure somebody will come up with some shiny new toy to talk about, but ultimately, I think the real value is just going to be kind of improvement. And I think last, I think we'd be naive to think that what the television landscape looks like today is going to be what it looks like in a year or 2 years. I think a lot of these new OTT services that have come to market over the last 12, 18 months, they kind of look like television, right? You watch things in a linear fashion. It's essentially broadcast the same to every household, right? If I go into my Samsung TV Plus device and I turn on one of their digital channels, it's bringing new content, new digital content into your living room, but it looks like a TV experience. I think that with the disruption being the kind of cost of getting on there being so much lower, I think we'll see much more experimentation. We'll see interesting services launch, on your TV, and I think I'm looking forward to seeing what that is, and I'm sure that's where I think the disruption, for lack of a better word, will come from in the space rather than everything necessarily we're seeing today.
Great, thank you all very much, and thank you to the audience for tuning in, and thank you to the panelists, to Rhys McLachlan from ITV, to John Tigg from Cadent, and to Leon Siotis from SpotX. The video of this session will be available on the VOD Pro website next Monday, and I'll be in touch about next week's session. Thank you all, thanks.